Maylene, after hearing your story, which was really moving and very powerful, what struck me was the love you have for your mother that continues to this day, but how hard it was for you to both juggle your role as a parent and providing and also as a caregiver. It reminded me that dysphagia doesn't just happen to the person with it, it happens to everyone in their circle.
Right. Yes. Oh, thank you. Yeah. It was a difficult journey for us indeed. And as you said, for the whole family. And what really stood out for me in your story that you shared, and thank you again for sharing your story, it was the pain that you experienced after your surgery, as well as the isolation that you mentioned that you experienced. And I think that was just so revealing for me to hear you talk about that feeling of isolation.
And it's funny you mentioned both of those things because the pain was every day for a long time. The pain is less, the isolation might actually be more, despite, my surgery and radiation and treatment for 4 years ago. Because the isolation, I manage it a little better, but it's still part of my everyday existence.
I'm just curious, is there anything that you would want to share to someone who is just starting their dysphagia journey?
What I would share with someone who's just received a dysphagia diagnosis is understand how hard this is. And that isn't to scare someone, but it is to very clearly explain that what you're about to go through for the rest of your life is going to challenge you physically. It's going to challenge you mentally. Educate yourself, try new things, try new foods, and get help where necessary. Seek out advice. Where possible, connect to someone else who has dysphagia through support groups or whatever. Build yourself a little bit of an army, right, of people that can help you navigate this, because the research will change, best practices will change, and you need to the best of your ability, stay on top of that and also not give up. Because I can tell you from my perspective, there were many days when I felt terribly sorry for myself, but just couldn't imagine that I was going to have to live the rest of my days struggling with a simple act of eating.
Right. I'm just wondering, is there anything else in your day-to-day other than the eating that dysphagia has impacted? I know you mentioned isolation and maybe not wanting to be around others for
I think
fear.
that, obviously I feel different physically. There's less of me because I don't eat as much, right? Because to help me navigate swallowing, I drink more fluids.
Okay.
So I fill up, so I eat less, and so there is a concern, at least that I have, my clinicians don't yet, is that am I properly nourishing my body? So that is a real concern, and certainly as I age, am I going to be able to get sufficient proteins and all the necessary stuff into my body so that I can sustain myself? The isolation is the one that's most profound for me, right? Because that whole idea of food as socialization, food as enjoyment is gone from my life now, right? And if you had told me that at the front end of this, I would have gone, well, how big a deal can that be?
Right.
It's far bigger than I would have imagined, right? And that goes to what I've said earlier in our conversations about the fatigue of having dysphagia.
Yeah.
It's like, oh no, not again. I got to, eat this, or I've got to try and figure out, did I cut that piece of chicken small enough? Is tonight going to be the night, where I have to go through this? Let me ask you, Maylene, what would you tell someone in a caregiver's role as they're embarking on this, what they should know?
What I would say to someone in a caregiver role is almost going to say what you said earlier, and that's the patience and not to be really hard on yourself, because I think that's something that I did in terms of the burden and feeling like I wish there was more that I can control. That it is something that you cannot control, but just be aware of the signs, be aware of. So my mom wasn't able to necessarily articulate what she was experiencing and challenging. That's why it's been so helpful to talk to you today, actually. So thank you for the conversation.
Yeah.
And because she wasn't able to articulate it, I had to watch for signs.
Right.
So if she was hungry, but unable to say she was hungry, sometimes she would pick up something that wasn't food and just do the motion of putting it to her mouth. So then I would, be able to, that was my cue. That was my cue. And so, I didn't realize, to be honest, that the coughing while drinking water was a sign of a swallowing difficulty. So again, the education, get the resources, learn about the disease, learn about the condition, so that you're able to be hopefully preventative and to get timely support.
After hearing your story and your family's story, right, because it is, again, a group effort, knowing what you know now, how would you approach it differently if this were to happen in your life again?
Yeah, thank you for that question, David. And I think this is something that I've pondered a lot. As a caregiver, we tend to bear the burden of the responsibility, and part of that is like not wrestling too much with the guilt, things that you could have done better. But one thing that I would have done absolutely is to seek support a bit earlier.
Okay.
And to seek out those tools and those resources that are available to help my mom to remain independent for as long as possible. One thing that I'm wondering, what would you tell a caregiver caring for someone with dysphagia? What do you think is important for them to keep in mind?
I would tell them, that they need to be very patient, understand the things that I've mentioned, the isolation, the fear. Know that that person in your life who you once might have shared meals with, they're different now. They may not look different, but they are struggling internally, mentally and physically with dysphagia, because it's not just a physical impairment. To me, a great part of this journey with this chronic condition is the mental toll it takes on you. So I would suggest that caregiver or that circle of care, that they educate themselves.
Right.
Dysphagia. It doesn't get cured by taking a pill. Right? It requires understanding, it requires empathy, and it really requires knowledge. Understand what's happened to this person's body that makes it so different now.
Yeah. Thank you. And you mentioned the mental health as well, and the mental wellness. And I think that's important for both, the patient and the caregiver. I wonder if there's anything else that, we can do.
Well, one of the things that I did, and this was initially connected to my cancer diagnosis, was I sought out counseling and treatment. But at the time, I was thinking of myself solely as a cancer patient. I wasn't thinking of myself as someone with dysphagia. And that's where I've had to make the leap mentally. And I think people in my world, they'll say, oh, you had cancer or have cancer, whichever it is. That isn't what guides my day-to-day existence. My dysphagia is what guides my day-to-day existence, right? How do I navigate it? How do I get from breakfast, lunch, and to dinner, and then, do it again the next day?
Yeah. What else did you have to change in your life?
Everything from how I interacted with people, how the foods I choose. I sort of live by this mantra, not really a mantra, more a slogan, which is the 3 worst times of every single day are breakfast, lunch, and dinner, because I have to make hard decisions about what I put in my mouth and how I provide sustenance. Prior to being diagnosed with dysphagia, cancer and dysphagia, I never didn't have to think about swallowing or what I chose to eat. But now it is a conscious decision every single day.
Yeah. That must be very difficult.
It is, but I think it's probably not dissimilar to what you had to go through with your mother and trying to ensure that she wasn't isolated, that she felt part of the family, that she could have also the dignity and some independence. But that gets harder as the disease progresses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
When I think about food, it's so central to bringing people together, culturally speaking as well. Like we always have food in our celebrations, and so that's difficult when that person you love is unable to really enjoy those foods.
Yeah, food to me now is work. It's sort of joyless work, because I know if I don't have it, I'm not going to be able to do what I need to do, get
Yeah.
around work, do whatever it is I do. But work now or food rather now is to me a job,
Right.
and not a job I particularly enjoy. One of the things you have to learn survival techniques with dysphagia. And on the rare occasion that I do go to a restaurant, I only do it with people I know. And when I go in, I scout. I go, where are the washrooms? I never sit on the inside, always on the outside. So if I have to move quickly, if I'm choking, I can get out of the way. Because one of the things that guides me is I don't want to make my condition someone else's problem or responsibility. Because I feel like I can manage it, or I am managing it now, but I don't want to put someone, who all of a sudden I'm choking, they're in a restaurant, they don't know what to do, and now it's a scene.
Right.
But it really requires you to adapt for survival. But I mean, you had to adapt with your mom, and like, what are some of the things you did?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we did. And I mean, part of that was, really having to change my schedule. And so I was around during meal times. And if I wasn't, I had to ensure that there was a personal support worker there that was able to assist with mealtime. And sometimes I really got creative with like creating meals that were easily adaptable. So especially culturally for us, like in a Jamaican home, we'd always have this big pot of soup with like yam and potatoes and like really great nutrient dense food. And so what I would do is I'd boil that down, and then I would have my food, and I would have like pieces of food in there, like the pumpkin and the chicken and whatever I'm having. But then with my mom's, I would either blend it or I would give her most of the broth, and then I would mash the potato in it, and then I would sit and eat, and I would have mine, I'd put mine down, and she's ready, and give her hers, and just kind of watching her as she would eat. And so those are times when, even though it was difficult, we were able to once again share a meal, and but adapting to, how that meal is prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
Sometimes ice cream for dinner.
Yes, never. Yes, puddings and ice cream. Do not say a bad word about either. They're not the most nutritious choice, certainly, but there is, and that's talk about adaptability. Sometimes, I've chosen things just because they feel good.
Right.
I know they're not really providing me with much nutrition, but sometimes because your head needs a break.
Yeah.
Your mind just needs to enjoy something for a short time.
Absolutely. And to see the smile on my mom's face.
Yes.
When I would be like, okay, mom, you're not really eating, but hey, how about some ice cream? She would literally eat that bowl of ice cream.
Yes.
Like hands down. Easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. Yeah.